ngilqab singel mergi daroguy ado mesrata metigi del 617 pakora diol ngitula se kadam lamu lomur ndi halle di da doctor klital londi bergit before lomu lang kalsi or kamame tolulu ubo bel damam dios langaraya ngadamra lungil qab singel uba kayimral tarober madam rogu yemalol dang semrang asule mertal teal no sa amal mertal west plaza adam dios eguk mormeng sa update tertal National Development Bank grab lurbela adam dios ruba kayimral lolngi tula sebom open a rengar kama malda swam rogu mormeng sa igel guk telang tengil tal bang kegi bom mogel agel ngarare ngarama merubak mosab el kutmok la dalang akla mal mokabak la igel guk barede la udaswa merubak rubak gi maldi mrang asule me maldi motroko kartrigel malat kal maral me pomobantri rubak la kal magasak le sal bakal mertal basyo tiragal mal motroko kartalon di berkama manggal President Trabang kal mo presente rubak pomobangel sa edawre ngaraka rubak pulong itigay galingira walel marawla bangalel tel presentation ngi adam Dios kimal dimrang asule mo ngi tayga lo bang klaladitan ngalge mo Jesus nga dingar lo sabla morar amen.
Thank you. Well, good evening everybody. Is the sound okay? The last time I did this, I blasted out the sound too loud at the first. So anyway, welcome to everybody here tonight. It's a wet and windy night, so thank you so much for joining us this evening. And for everybody who was here 6 months ago for the first of these outreach sessions, welcome back. The first one that I did back in March was a bit of an experiment. I wasn't sure how many people would be interested in hearing about banking on a wet evening, but it seemed to get some good feedback, so we've decided to continue this every 6 months. Frankly, it gives us a chance to give you an update as to what's going on in the bank. And I always think as bankers, we need to be part of the community. There's this sense that bankers sit in an ivory tower and expect customers to come to the bank. I'm not that kind of banker. I think bankers should be out talking to people. We're just regular people, so we need to have the conversations to hear what's on your mind, and for us to be able to tell you what our plans are and what we're working on going forward. So this is what this session is about. Tonight, let me see if we can get this working. Here we go. These are the 4 topics that I covered 6 months ago. So just to do a quick refresher, last time we talked about 4 elements, 4 fundamental important things that I thought we needed to discuss in Palau. So the first one was that Palauan savings are being sent offshore and being used to develop Guam and Hawaii. So 90% of all the deposits that Palauans place with American banks in Palau are not used to develop Palau. 90% are sent offshore to Guam and Hawaii. Okay. So one of my objectives is to see how we can reverse that cycle, how we can ensure that Palauan money is used for the benefit of Palauans. So I think it's still on YouTube. If you want to have a look at the discussion we had 6 months ago, please go back and have a look. The second thing that I talked about was something called home equity loan, which was a new loan program that we introduced. And I'll give you an update in terms of how that program is running. We also spent some time last time talking about the construction sector in Palau. One of the things we talked about was the need for a national construction code. I noticed that some of the Palauan houses maybe are not quite straight, and maybe some of the roofs, well, maybe they're not quite strong enough for a monsoon or a typhoon. So we spent some time talking about the construction sector. And finally, and probably most dear to everybody's hearts, I talked about interest rate cuts and what the bank had already done and what we were hoping to do going forward. And again, I'll give some more updates on that theme tonight. But that was 6 months ago, and a lot has happened in 6 months. So tonight, I wanted to do two things. One was to give you some more updates. What have we been up to in the last 6 months? And the second, I thought I'd just spend some time talking about a theme called building wealth in Palau. And what I mean by this is I'm not trying to make us all into Elon Musk. Really, what I'm trying to do is see how we can help the community make that step beyond living paycheck to paycheck or pension payment to pension payment. What is it that we can do to begin to build up a little bit of savings for ourselves for the rainy day that may come in the future? So that's really the theme that I'll be talking about tonight. Okay, so let's start with the updates about the bank. What are we up to? The first message is that as I stand here today, I'm very proud of the work that everybody in the bank is doing. We have 19 staff in the bank working extremely hard for the community. So the bank today is healthy and working for you. And if you look at where we are today relative to where we were 12 months ago, here are some of the important differences. 12 months ago, we weren't introducing interest rate cuts. 12 months ago, the bank had reported 2 years of losses. 12 months ago, the total loans that we were making to the community was declining. And 12 months ago, we had nearly 20% of our loans not performing, and that means that people were not able to repay on time. Okay, so the bank needed to change direction a little bit. Well, here we are 12 months on. Today, I'm very happy to be talking about interest rate cuts, about the cuts we've already introduced, and also happy that the bank is profitable. Now, we're a development bank, so we're here to support the community. So my aim is not to maximize profit. My aim is to bring the most benefit to the community. But I can't help the community if the bank is generating losses. So I have to be profitable, but not too much. I need to keep giving the benefit back to the community. So I have to get that balance right. Over the last 12 months, we've increased our loan portfolio, meaning our total loans outstanding, by 12%. And we also have only 1% of our portfolio today, all of our loans, where they're not being paid on time. So you can see that in the last 12 months, and this is not me, this is the team that are working and supporting me every single day, they have made a huge impact on the bank, and that's important message for the community. We are now here, we're healthy, we're working hard, we can do things with the community we weren't able to do 12 months ago. Now, for those of you who know me, I tend to tell things as they are. So a lot of presenters would come and tell you about a glass half full and a glass half empty. Well, my style is to tell you when the glass is completely empty, when the glass is completely full, or some way in between. And that's what you'll hear this evening with the updates. I'll just tell you as it is, because I believe that's the way to build trust and have honest conversations in the community. So what you'll hear from me is some good news and also some not good news, some bad news. But that's the real world that we all live in. So, should we start with bad news? Let's get the bad news out of the way. Bad news. First of all, 6 months ago, I was asked whether NDBP could provide loans to ex-military vets. The American Veterans Affairs have a program which are discounted cheap loans as well as medical benefits for ex-military personnel. And as we all know, a lot of Palauans have been in the American military. So over the last 6 months, I've been having a conversation with the US Embassy here to see whether NDBP could be approved as a lender under this VA program. Unfortunately, the news has now come back that that's not possible. That under the VA program, legislation prevents use of VA loans outside US and US territories. Now, I don't think this is the end of the conversation. I'm sure as part of the ongoing compact discussions, this will continue to be addressed. But I wanted to make it clear, we have tried, we have asked, we've got a direct response. And this is where we stand at the moment on VA loans. The next one. One of the things that I talked about last time was that NDBP had submitted a license application to something called the Financial Institutions Commission. That's the regulator in Palau that decides which banks are authorized to take deposits. So at the moment, we're not authorized to take deposits. We can make loans, but we can't take deposits. So the team have put together a lot of paperwork, submitted the application to the FIC, which is an independent agency here. And they have a two-step process when they decide whether to give us a license or not. The first step they take is, are we fit and proper? Is the management and board for the bank suitable, experienced enough to run a bank? The second question is, do the operations, do the activities, do the processes, the policies, do they meet the right standards to run a bank? Now, we submitted this application 6 months ago, and FIC is an independent body, so I let them follow their own process. Unfortunately, I have to report that as of today, we have 19 days left. It's a 6-month period where FIC can decide whether or not the bank is suitable to take deposits. So we have 19 days left. FIC have not informed us yet whether we're eligible to take deposits. So I will leave that with FIC, but the idea of the bank taking deposits was specifically to address this issue of Palauan money being placed in American bank branches and being sent offshore. If Palauans had an opportunity to put deposits with the National Development Bank, we will use that money to lend into Palau, to support the development of Palau. That's why we want to be able to take deposits. But it's down to the FIC. It's their decision. The next one to cover. We already have a program which is a subsidized loan program for installing solar kits at home. These are for residential homes. And we have already agreed with Asia Development Bank a similar program for non-residential buildings. So this could be schools, it could be medical centers, it could be churches, it could be government buildings, it could be commercial buildings. Any building not classified as a home would be included in this program. So what it would mean is that the bank would make loans for users to purchase solar kits. And the loans that we would provide would be 15 years at an interest rate of 5.5%. Very attractive rate, especially taking into account, hopefully, the reduction in the electricity bills that the businesses would benefit from. Now, the difficulty, as we all know, is that PPUC have been very busy with the system and stabilizing the network. And so, as it stands, we're just waiting for PPUC to give us the technical specifications, the technical sign-off, to make sure that whatever equipment is installed under this program meets the PPUC system requirements. This is taking a little bit of time, a little bit more time than I had anticipated. So we're still talking to PPUC, still following up with them, and hopefully by the next time I'm here, in 6 months' time, this will be a live program. Okay? So don't forget about this. We're very keen to launch it. We have $5 million available for this program. So we're just waiting for these specs to be approved, and then we can launch. Something to look forward to. The next one, for any business owners in the room, there have been a huge amount of discussions with the OEK about the possibility of forgiving some outstanding debt that SMEs have to NDBP. Now, the issue here is there's two questions that everybody is trying to determine, which is which businesses should be eligible for this debt forgiveness and how much. And that discussion has been a very active discussion between the House of Delegates as well as the Senate. We have had, I forget how many different versions as to how this structure could be applied. I have given, I don't know how many different options and proposals. I think we're getting closer to a conclusion, and I would hope that in the next few weeks there will be an announcement, and then we can begin to introduce this debt forgiveness program. As it stands at the moment, I can't answer those two questions for you. I'm sure that's top of mind. I can see Irene is here. I can't answer that question. I have to wait until OEK, the House, and the Senate agree on this structure. But it is a live discussion and a very active discussion. Let's start getting a bit more positive about things. This afternoon, I was in a Senate oversight hearing about the possibility of Saudi Arabia making a $15 million loan to Palau, which would be used by NDBP for especially housing development. Now, let me get a bit more specific about this, because I want to explain what I really have in mind with this program. I've spent a lot of time over the last 12 months trying to implement interest rate cuts. But interest rate cuts are not the only priority that I think Palauans face. My concern is I see a lot of young Palauans leaving the country, and part of the reason for that is the lack of affordable housing. So my approach has been to talk to the states to say the states own a lot of land, but they don't have money to develop the land. The bank, if we can get the benefit of this loan from Saudi Arabia, the bank has the money, but we don't own the land. So why don't we come together into a joint venture partnership, the bank and the states together, and that joint venture can build and construct and sell condos, condominiums. They could be 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom condominiums. Now, my thinking here is, first of all, if we do this, I only want these condominiums sold to Palauans. I don't want them sold to US military. I don't want them sold to rich people to make a lot of money from renting out. I want these condos made available for sale to people who are looking for their first home. I'm talking at the moment to 2 states just as a first step to just see if we can make this happen. The response has been very positive from the state, so I'm very encouraged by it. And effectively, we would take the benefit of this cheap loan. NDBP would finance the infrastructure costs, so the access road to the site, the sewage system, the water system, the electricals, all of the utilities, as well as the construction of the condos. So my thinking is, can we make these developments so that maybe there's a laundrette on the site, maybe there's a communal barbecue area, maybe a kids' playground, somewhere to park the car, but essentially give people the opportunity to own an affordable place for the first time. That's the ambition. I'm excited about it. I think it's very much within our grasp, and I would really like to see this happening over the next 12 months. The first step is the OEK just need to approve this $15 million Saudi loan, and we are ready to move. We have lawyers working on this as we speak. So that's an exciting development, and I hope it helps Palau begin to solve another big problem, not just interest rates, but how we address this lack of housing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that theme later as well. Okay, so it's probably time to talk about the most exciting news of the night, which you may well have seen, but I have just announced that we've made another interest rate cut, another 1% interest rate cut, and this is on our product which we call the first-time homeowner mortgage. So when somebody buys a property for the first time in Palau, we give them a special subsidized rate, which up until recently has been 8%. With effect from the 1st of September, all existing customers as well as new applicants receive an interest rate cut to 7%. And the letters are being issued today or over the last few days. If you haven't received your letter yet, don't worry, they're in the mail. I'm sure the post office will deliver. But hopefully this will help your pay pocket for the next week as you see the benefit of this interest rate coming. I'm very proud of this picture, by the way. I was trying to find a suitable picture. I went on the internet and used AI. I asked AI to give me a picture of a Pacific Islander on a water chute, and this is what AI came up with. So if you don't think the little girl looks like a Palauan, don't blame me. You can blame AI. But anyway, I hope you get the theme. The idea is we're heading down on interest rates. We're not heading up. Okay. So, another piece of good news. I talked about the home equity loan program a few minutes ago. This is the actual trajectory for our new product. So we launched this back in March. We had no loans when we launched. Now look at where we are. We're just under $3 million in 6 months. This is new money dispersed. This is not promised money. This is money in people's hands. And this product can be used for any purpose. Any purpose. So we think this is like a rocket ship at the moment. We have a lot of applicants that are on our waiting list. The team are trying their very best to process these applications as quickly as we can. Bear with us. Okay, we're working hard. I hope in October we can accelerate some of the disbursements, but already you can see that we're working hard. And this is a very successful program, and I'm delighted. It was an experiment, but I'm delighted that it's meeting the needs of the community. Now, there's just one other thing to mention about this program. At the moment, it's a loan that is secured on your property. And at the moment, we can provide this loan if your property is on fee simple land, or if your property is leased from the public state authorities in Arai, Niwal, and Narad. If you live in a different state and you would like to be able to access this loan, please lobby your public land authority. Okay? Because I would very much like to offer this loan in every single state across Palau. We are the National Development Bank of Palau. We shouldn't be favoring certain states over others. So I would really encourage you, please have a conversation with your governors, your land authorities, and see if we can include your state in this program. Okay? Now, when I launched this program, I did say at the time, bankers should not tell people how to spend their money. It's your money, it's not my money. But I thought I'd just put up a couple of slides to touch on a couple of things here. There's a very famous quote. Okay, this was from, actually it's come from a gentleman back in the 30s, which just shows you that some things don't change. So this was back in the 1930s. A chap called Will Rogers, who was a social commentator. He said, "Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want, to impress people they don't like." And even though he said that 100 years ago, I still think it applies today. So with this loan, think about how you're using the money. Don't impress people you don't like. Impress yourself, do something for yourself, not to impress the neighbor. So if you are using this loan for these things, for things like debt consolidation of expensive loans from the payday lenders, as I call them, instead of paying 18%, this loan is a 10-year loan at 9%. So it's half the interest rate. So if you're doing debt consolidation, great use for this loan. If you're doing home improvements or medical referral fees or paying off scholarships, or if you're a small business and you want to increase your inventory in your store or to support your business, use this program. It's a very good program. However, if you want to use this loan to go and buy a brand new car or a brand new boat instead of a second-hand car or a second-hand boat, or you decide to go and spend your money on an expensive vacation to Las Vegas, or to buy a huge new television, I won't say no, but the thing to bear in mind is loans allow us to spend more money than we have today because we have less money in the future as we're repaying the loan. Yeah? So my point is really very simple. The loan program is available to support Palauans. You decide your own lives, but please think carefully. Use this money wisely, okay? But we're very keen to support you in whatever your ambitions are. Okay, that covers the key updates that I wanted to mention tonight, and I'm happy to take questions as we wrap up the session later. But it's time now to switch gears a little, and I wanted to talk about this theme of building wealth in Palau. How do we help each other begin to save a little bit instead of having to live from paycheck to paycheck to paycheck? So I'm going to break this down into 3 sections. And we're going to start with the basics. And all of these things that I'm going to show you apply just as much to me as to everybody in this room. We all know these things that I'm going to say, but it's nice to have a reminder every now and then. So what I'm going to do to keep this simple, instead of talking about lots of numbers, I'm just going to put up some very famous quotes from people, which gives some, I think, some very good tips for all of us as to how we can try and help ourselves save a little bit. So here's the first one. And it wasn't Yoda that said this, but I thought he might say it. The first one is, spend what is left after saving. Don't save what is left after spending. Okay? So this was by a gentleman called Warren Buffett, who's a very rich investor in the US. But actually, it has a very basic truth here, which is, as we get our paycheck, try, I know it's hard with the cost of living in Palau, but try to just take just a few dollars out of that paycheck as you first receive it and just put it away somewhere. And then spend what is left. Because if you wait until the end of the 2-week period to see what you've got left over to save, there isn't anything, is there? I mean, we're spending everything that we're paid. So try to think about this as a lesson. Just try, every paycheck, try to put a little bit away, and gradually you can build up a reserve for all of those rainy days that we know are going to happen in the future. Okay. So think about this. Second suggestion. Beware of little expenses. A small leak will sink a great ship. This was Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers in the US. And I thought for Palau, well, if somebody is going out and spending on an expensive coffee, or if they're buying paper kitchen towels instead of just using a cloth that you can wash, or if you're going to your favorite restaurant and spending money on restaurant food every week. And yes, do I need to talk about the other one? Okay. It's a little expense at a time, but it's exactly those little expenses that will create the leak in your financial ship. Okay? So please, think about the little expenses, a little change in behavior. It should make a difference to you every single week. Okay? Somebody told me that's not a Palauan mouth. But I think you get the idea. Yeah. Next one. A budget is telling your money where to go instead of wondering where it went. Okay? Now, a budget sounds very technical. It sounds like the kind of thing that a banker would talk about. But a budget can be as simple as you make it. It's simply trying to write down how much you think you're going to receive this week and how much you think you have to spend. And hopefully you can see in the cash out, I deliberately put savings, okay, as the first item. The idea being you save first and spend later. Okay? So think about a really simple budget for yourself. And then monitor it to see, are you in control or is your money spending itself? Mm-hmm. People are laughing, so I can see they can relate to this. This one is a little different. This actually came from Einstein. And he said, compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Now, what on earth does that mean? What is compound interest? So what he's really saying is, if you take a loan and you can't afford to repay all of the loan, at least make sure you pay the interest. If you don't repay the interest, the bank adds on interest to the interest, and that interest is on your loan. So it very quickly snowballs in terms of the amount of money that you owe the bank. So if you're short of money and you can't afford to repay the whole repayment, at least pay the interest. And then you don't have that compounding effect. You don't have the snowball effect where the debt just gets bigger and bigger. Okay? The nice thing about this is it works in the opposite direction. If you have some savings and you don't dip into your savings, and your savings are earning interest, well, the snowball works in your favor because the bank puts interest on your interest. Okay? So that's why this idea of thinking about, are you receiving interest or having to pay interest, very important to manage your cash flow and your expenses. Okay? Now, that's the first section. Those are the basics. I'm going to start talking about some things that I think are going to send me into a minefield. But we're going to have a try and see if I get out alive, okay? So I want to talk about what I see as some fundamental obstacles to saving in Palau. Bear with me, see how we go. The first set of obstacles I want to talk about are three things. I want to talk about something called demographics, which is just a fancy way of saying what is the mix of population in Palau. Second thing I want to talk about, and I think everybody in this room is an expert on this topic, is PGST. And this is a big line mine I can well walk into. The third one I want to talk about, which is another potential landmine in a different way, is Palau customs. Now, why is there a picture of a frog there? Well, offshore, there's a bit of a myth about frogs. So some people believe that if you put a frog in a bucket of water and you begin to heat the water just very gradually, the frog has the ability to adjust its skin so it adjusts to the temperature around it. So as you gradually keep turning the temperature of the water up, the frog still swims in the bucket. And you turn it up a little bit more, and you turn the heat up a little bit more, and a little bit more, the frog still adjusts. Until it should be jumping out because the water is nearly boiling, and it doesn't. And it has the final click, the water is boiling, and the frog never jumps out. So this frog in a boiling water is the theme that I see for Palauans, because I see the financial stress in this community is clicking up and up and up and up. And Palauans are trying their very best to adjust to it. But I'm worried that Palauans can't behave like a frog. You can't carry on adjusting without making some bigger changes. And that's really one of the themes that I want to talk about tonight. So, frog in a bucket. Let's start with talking about the population. This is the image that I have for Palauans. And let me explain. I'm going to start first with the overall typical cycle in life in terms of building wealth. So for most people, they build wealth from the start. After they leave school, they hopefully find a job, and they begin to build their wealth or build their earnings until about age 55. About age 55, people begin to think about retirement in the future. So they think about preserving, about protecting the money that they have saved, if they have. And then as people retire after 65, that's when they use the pension, when they use their savings that they've earned over the years. One of the important things for any community is to think about how many people are in this group compared to the other group. So let's look into what the data shows. I think we're due a census update this year, I believe, but this is the 2020 Palau census data. And what you can see in the black bar, I'm not sure if you can see the numbers at the back there, but in 2020 there were 17,614 people living in Palau. And if we look at how many of those were Palauans or dual citizenship Palauans, it's about 12,700 at that time. Okay? Now, when you take the total 17,000 and break it down by age group, the orange line at the top is the age group that, let's call it, is at the employable age. That's the workforce for the country. So you can see that between 2012 and 2020, there was a slight decline, but it's about 70% roughly are in the workforce. And the green line at the bottom are the seniors group, the retirees. And you can see between 2012 and 2020, the percentage of seniors, the percentage of retirees living in Palau has increased as a proportion of the overall. So we'll switch those percentages to numbers. Okay, those are the exact same percentages, but just in numbers. And out of the 12,564, can you see that number in the orange on the top right? So that's the number that is available to work. At that time, in 2020, 10,980 of those people were employed. Mm-hmm. So let's drill down this hole a little bit further. So here's this 10,980 people employed. We're going to break it down by nationality. In 2020, the blue line is the total people employed in Palau. The orange line are the foreigners employed in Palau. So these are the Filipinos, the Bangladeshis, and yes, even people like me, the English. Okay? What you'll see in the green is the number of Palauans employed. Now, there's two things that I found interesting about this. One is, you'll see that in 2023, the number of Palauans employed is fewer than the number employed in 2020. So I can understand the dip during COVID, but what this shows is that there are fewer Palauans today working in Palau than there used to be. And I think this just highlights the fact that so many of the young people are choosing to leave Palau and not working in Palau, which is a concern. The other thing to note is there's only 4,500 Palauans employed. So out of more than 12,000 Palauans, roughly about a third of those Palauans are employed. 2/3 are what I would call dependents. They could be children, they could be seniors living off pensions. But what it means is the burden on the Palauans who are earning a paycheck is very high because they're having to support a large number of people around them in the community who are not earning. That is a big burden, big burden. So some questions. As a foreigner, I'm still getting to know Palau. So I'm not arrogant enough to think that I know all the answers, but I do want to put some questions out there for the community to consider, because you know Palau better than I do. So these are questions for you to consider. This is just me as an outsider seeing these issues and prompting you, encouraging you to think about these things. So the first thing that I would ask you to consider is, we have launched our home equity program. So we are increasing, making it easier for people to access loans and debt. And under Palauan custom, it's customary for the community to support the debt of the deceased, to support the family during that period, under Palauan custom. So might the combination of the easier access to debt and Palauan custom encourage seniors to do some irresponsible lending? Are we encouraging seniors to take on more debt in the knowledge that Palauan custom has it that if they pass away without repaying those loans, the burden passes on to the surviving family members? Mm-hmm. So it's something for the society to consider. And then as a final question here, can the declining percentage of employed Palauans, remember these 4,500 people, can they continue to support the debts of the deceased in the future? I know traditionally that has been the way, but if there's only 4,500 Palauans employed, can this trend continue? It's a question for Palauans, not for me, okay? Okay. Now we're going to get into some interesting conversations, okay? Because I view PGST and customs as two issues that should be discussed at the same time. So that's why I've shown Batman and Robin. Okay? I don't think you can have one without the other. And before I jump in to talk about PGST, a couple of caveats. The first thing is, I'm a civil servant. My job is to support the elected government in Palau, whichever government is chosen by the Palauan people. So nothing this evening is intended as a political statement. And if you ask me a question which I think is trying to veer me into a political statement, I will politely decline. Okay, that's the understanding that we should have amongst ourselves. The second thing I would say is, I know there's a lot of discussion about how PGST has been implemented, and maybe, should it be raise and refund? Is it too much too soon? The import, export, etc., the input and output tax. I don't want to get down into the details. The purpose of this is to look at the high-level position, just to explain a few things that I don't think Palauans have really understood. Okay? So with that, allow me to move forward. I'm going to talk about PGST. And from my perspective as a banker, you may not like this message, but as a banker, I would say to you that PGST is not going to go away. It doesn't matter which government is elected, PGST is not going to go away. And as far as I can see, both candidates are not saying PGST will go away. They're actually talking about how PGST is going to be applied. But it's not going to go away for three fundamental reasons. And I want Palauans to understand. The first reason it's not going to go away is because goods and services tax is now almost worldwide. Almost every country on the planet has a goods and services tax. So here I put down a list of more than 100 countries with the tax rate for each country for their goods and services tax. In fact, there were so many countries, I'm sorry, I couldn't even fit in all of the country names. But what I can tell you is that the country with the highest goods and service tax is Hungary. That rate is 27%. And the country with the lowest GST is, right at the far side, is Andorra, which is a tiny country between Spain and France. And their GST rate is 4.5%. And what you can see is the red bar is where Palau is today with its 10% PGST. So what you can see is, relative to the more than 100 countries around the world, 10%, it's not the lowest, but it's certainly at the lower end of the scale. So just so everybody understands, this is sort of where Palau is in terms of its current rate. There's a second reason why PGST is not going to go away. As at the financial year ending 23, as a percentage, Palau had borrowed a lot of money. Understandably, because of its need to be able to find its path through COVID and the loss of tourism business. So it's entirely understandable. And I'm very confident that this high level of debt will come down relatively quickly as the economy increases, as well as now with the Compact Fund, some of this debt will be repaid. But always remember, tax is in part going to be used to service the loans that Palau has taken on to help its economy through the tough times. That's a second reason why I don't think PGST will go away. And then there's a third reason, which is that foreigners pay most of the PGST. And let me explain. These are my estimates. Mark and his economics team did help me with this, but if there's any errors in these estimates, it's entirely my fault, okay? Not Mark's fault. And these are my estimates, so they may well be wrong. I don't think they're wrong by a lot. Okay? So roughly, these are where I think the numbers are. So for the financial year ending 24, PGST will raise in total about $27 million for Palau. And that $27 million, 57%, so nearly 60% of it, will be paid by tourists or foreigners who are living in Palau, with the remainder, 43%, being paid by Palauans. So if we didn't have PGST, the foreigners wouldn't have to pay this 15 million. But there's something else we need to add into here, because there's been a series of benefits that have been passed down to Palauans, whether it be child subsidy, disability allowance, the minimum wage, the $480 for seniors and for those with a $15,000 to $30,000 salary. Those benefits that have been passed down to Palauans haven't gone to the foreigners. They've just been focused on the Palauans. When you add up all of those benefits, I'm estimating the value of those benefits at about $6 million. So when you add in those benefits, Palauans paid out $12 million, but they received back, or those in need, the most needy, received back $6 million. So the net payment by Palauans is $6 million. compared to $15 million that the foreigners have paid. Are you with me? Is everything okay? Clear? So that's why PGST is actually so beneficial to Palau, because it's foreigners who pay most of this tax. There's a burden on Palauans for sure, but remember, foreigners are paying most of it. Now I want you to remember the $6 million number. Okay, that's the net number that I think Palauans are paying. Because now I want to talk about Palauan customs. Now, my first year at Cambridge, I read social anthropology. So I know very well the importance worldwide of tradition and customs in each culture. There's something fundamental and embedded in each culture. There's a pride in the customs. So nothing that I have to say here is a negative against Palauan customs. Okay? I have enormous respect for the fact that Palauan has this long-standing tradition and carries it forward day by day. But there is something that I want Palauans to consider. So house parties, firstborn ceremonies, and funerals, those are the aspects that I'd like to talk about. Let's talk firstly about funerals. This is the data for funerals over the last few years in Palau. The orange line is the actual number of funerals. The green line is what we call a trend line. So it's a sort of average. It's trying to smooth the ups and downs year by year, just so that you can get a sense. Is it going up? Is it going down? I think what you can see is gradually over the last few years, it's just gradually trending upwards. It's not very significant, but it's trending upwards. I think many would say, actually, in the years gone by, there used to be far more funerals. Well, of course, that was because there were more Palauans living in Palau. Now there's many more Palauans who are offshore. And Patrick Talay gave me this data. So Patrick collects this data every year. He's collected it, he tells me, for 19 years. Next year is the 20th year, and he intends to publish the whole 20-year record of how much money has been raised from funerals. What you can see is for funerals in 2023, the amount of cash, this is not traditional money, this is not turtle shell, okay, this is actual hard US dollars raised at funerals, was more than $8 million. $8 million. If we add on house parties, if we add on firstborn ceremonies, I don't know what that number is. You may have a better idea than me, but I'm going to estimate it's got to be at least $10 million. $10 million. And we said $6 million is the net amount that Palauans pay for PGST. So this is why I'm raising this issue, because as I've been going state to state and talking to people, the first thing people want to talk about is PGST, PGST. The first thing I want to talk about is Palauan custom, Palauan custom. Okay? So Palauan custom is not controlled by the government. Palauan custom is controlled by the community leaders, for sure, the clan heads, but it's a community issue. And if there's one message I would encourage Palauans today, it's to begin to have some honest conversations about not just PGST, but the combination of PGST and customs. Taking into account there's only 4,500 Palauans who are actually employed. So some questions for you. Palau's society is aging. We saw that from that green line, do you remember? And we've seen that there's a reducing proportion of employed Palauans relative to dependents. Dependents meaning children and seniors or unemployed. And we also see there's an increasing number of funerals relative to the number of Palauans employed. And it's customary for the deceased's debt, the debt of the deceased, to be supported by the community. So has Palauan custom become an incentive for the youth to leave Palau? If they stay in Palau, they have to carry the burden of an aging population. They know there's an increasing number of funerals ahead of them that they have a responsibility under the custom to support. If they leave Palau, maybe they find a better job, but they know for sure they won't have the same obligation to support the elderly here in Palau. I don't think that was the original intent for Palauan custom, but the reality is that's what it appears to be today. I think in days gone by, from the books I've read, funeral ceremonies used to be about bringing food and recognition of the deceased and allowing the soul to depart the earth, allowing the community to recognize their obligations to the deceased. But it was food, perhaps traditional money, perhaps turtle shell, but it wasn't hard cash dollars. So something has changed in this tradition that has placed us in this position. And because of that, this community is encouraging its youth to leave Palau. Another question. Palauan custom has many layers to it, I understand. But in part, this custom, I'm sure, was intended to support those in need. And I'm sure this arose before Palau had a formal government. This was the community's way to support everybody in the community. Everybody came together to support each other because there wasn't a centralized government to do that. But today, we do have a central government. And that central government is applying a tax on the community. And the purpose of that tax is to provide benefits to those in need. The child subsidy, the disability support, the payments to those with minimum wage, etc. So the question I have, is there an overlap? Are Palauans now in a position where they're paying twice? They support the community in need through custom, and they support the community in need by paying PGST. Everywhere else in the world, people pay PGST. They don't pay Palauan custom as well. It's Palauans who are in this situation, not the rest of the world. Third question. If we're finding that PGST and custom is too much, we simply can't afford, we're getting stretched, the temperature in this bucket with the frog in it is just ratcheting up, it's getting far too hot, we can't stand this anymore, something has to change. On the one hand, custom is embedded, deeply embedded, rightly embedded in Palauan tradition. On the other hand, we have a tax system that is global. We have debts that we have to repay, and this tax system means that the foreigners are actually the ones that are paying this debt off. So, for those who are spending a lot of time talking about PGST at this time of year, I would encourage the debate to discuss both. Not just one or the other, but both at the same time. I think the issue facing Palau's community is not PGST on its own. I think the issue is the combination of the two, Palauan custom and PGST. And I would encourage you, as you have your community gatherings, as you talk with family and friends about these issues, try not to just focus on PGST. Okay? That may be Batman, but think about Robin. Okay? It goes hand in hand. It's all about how much cash is going out of your pocket every day. What is the burden on you individually? What is the burden on your children? What is the burden on those employed in Palau? Okay. Okay. So now I want to talk about crabs. This is the last section before I can take some questions. Because I think this is a second obstacle to saving in Palau. And I want to talk about the policies of the state land authorities. Now, this chart is a chart which was researched. They tried to identify what is it that makes people more wealthy than the person next to them. And what they found in the gray, that thin line in the gray, is that some people are wealthier because they inherit money from their parents. Think about Donald Trump, I suppose. That would be an example. Some people in the purple are in jobs that pay more. So that's how they build their wealth. But what you can see in the, I called this purple, whatever color that is, that's the wealth from your income, from your employment. But this color and this color is how much money you make in addition from your savings. And what it shows, what it's really telling us, is that to be slightly more rich than your neighbor, most people do it because they start saving at an early age, and they keep saving, and they keep putting a little bit away, a little bit more than the next door neighbor. And that is how people relatively save money. In Palau, we're in a subsistence society, I think. We're living paycheck to paycheck, and that's why I want to talk about what are these obstacles? How can we try and break through so that people can afford to save a little bit? So as a Palauan, how can we save? What options do we have to save money? Well, one option would be to put deposits into the American banks. The problem is, American banks offer 0% interest. So you put $20 into a deposit account, and in 6 months' time, you'll get $20 back. So that doesn't really help. We don't have a stock market in Palau, so we can't buy stocks and shares. We can't buy gold. We can't buy fancy artwork or wine. We don't have an option. Even if we had money to save, what do we do with it? Well, the options we do have, first, we could try to be an entrepreneur. This is where Irene and her team does a lot of work. So one option is that we can work for ourselves and try to convert our hobby into a business that can earn more money. But being an entrepreneur is difficult. Okay? It's not for everybody. So for some it works, but it's not for everybody. Another option would be to go to Moylan's and buy something called a term insurance. So you save a little bit of money every month, and in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, they invest it on your behalf, and you get back a better return. That would be another option. And the third option, which is the one I want to just spend some time on, is something I call the property ladder, because I don't think Palau has a property ladder. And let me explain what I mean by it. In most countries in the world, there are a range of different types of housing. So typically, somebody leaving school or leaving college, if they get a job, typically they rent a small, maybe a room in a house, but they rent. And they rent because they're trying to save up money so that they can buy a small one-bed condominium. And when they buy a one-bed condominium, they carry on saving a little bit more, and then they sell the condo and combine it with their savings to buy a bigger condo. And they keep doing that. They keep stepping up this ladder. So they go from a condo to something called a townhouse. So a condo is cheap to build because you share a wall with your neighbors, and your floor is somebody else's ceiling. So it's cheap to build a condo. A townhouse is a little bit more expensive to build because you just share walls. You don't share your floor and ceiling. So it's a step up. A semi-detached house is where you have two houses, each of them share one wall. So it's a bit more expensive than a townhouse. And then you step up to a small detached house, and finally to Buckingham Palace. So that is what I call the property ladder. You step up, you save, you sell what you've purchased, and you use that to buy a bigger place as you go through your life. The problem in Palau is we don't have this property ladder. What we have is a lot of standalone houses. So if you're fresh from college and you're not earning very much, how on earth can you afford to step all the way out to build a new property? Even if you could find the land to build on, how can you afford to build a detached home? It's not possible. So this is one of the reasons why I want NDBP to begin to support the construction of condos in Palau, so that we give this first step on the property ladder, so that people can find their own home to live in, save some money, and look to the future. But there's a second thing that I want to focus on, which is how do people save up money when they're in a small detached house to buy a bigger home, which is not easy in Palau. So let's talk about housing. This is the data for housing in Palau. And what you'll see is that more than 60% of all houses in Palau are in Koror. More than 60%. So the first question I have is it possible for some of the other states nearby to release land so that more homes can be built in Imalik or Arai or Melikiok? Because I think there are people living in Koror who, if they had an opportunity, would be more than happy to move into these neighboring states. That's the first question. The second point I'd like to make is that for most land authorities, when somebody has purchased a home on state lease land and they've built their home and then they come to sell their home, most land authorities allow the homeowner to choose who they sell the home to and at what price. Most accept, sorry, oops. Let me go back here. Most accept KSPLA. KSPLA, which remember has 60% of the homes in Palau, their policy is that when somebody who's a homeowner on state leased land, they want to sell that loan, KSPLA have a waiting list. So KSPLA tells the homeowner, this is who you can sell your property to, because they're the next one on the waiting list. And not just that, but KSPLA tell the homeowner, this is the price you can sell it at, which is the appraised value, independent appraised value. Now, the problem with that is when people make appraisals, when they try to assess what is the value of a property, they compare recent transactions. So can you see what's happening here? KSPLA is trying to be independent, but actually what's happening is prices are not adjusting, because when you try to sell, you're selling at the same price that somebody else sold recently. So you're not getting any benefit, even though the price of a new home, the price of materials is more. It's based, the price you're selling at is what was recently sold by a comparable home. Now, KSPLA has good intentions. Let's just walk through the intentions. The first benefit of their approach is there's a waiting list of people who want a home in Koror. So the waiting list means that there's a first come, first served. Oops. Okay? So first come, first served. Their approach also means that the rich can't buy up all the properties in Koror and rent out, which is another good benefit. And the third benefit is their policy prevents house prices from escalating, from increasing to a point that nobody can afford. So the intentions are good. The difficulty is that sometimes there's this law of unintended consequences. We do things with good intentions, but it comes back to hit us in a different way. And I think this is what's happening with KSPLA. Because their policy means that there is no property ladder. Somebody on state leased land in Koror can never step up to a bigger home, because the prices are being controlled. So the question, and I think this is the final question of the night, is there a middle path? Can KSPLA segment the homes on its leased land? So can they create a situation where some of those homes are available for low-income families, but also make the rest of the homes available for sale at whatever price the seller and buyer agree, as long as the buyer occupies the home? So we don't want the rich buying up all the Koror houses and renting them. As long as the buyer lives in the home, let the buyer and the seller have a free negotiation on price and not be influenced by prices that have taken place on an appraisal basis. If we do that, then we move away from crabs in buckets. Crabs in buckets pull each other down. Okay? Humans in a bucket should be helping each other up and out. And that's why I'd like to see a slightly different approach for KSPLA's land policy, which I think would benefit everybody in Palau. Okay, you've all been very gracious. Time to wrap up. I've covered updates on the bank. I've covered some comments about ideas as to how we can try and encourage some savings or some building of wealth in Palau. I hope it's been a useful session, and I'm more than happy to cover any questions that you have. But thank you for all the attention you give me. Thank you. So, questions? Yes, there's a microphone. Is there a microphone somewhere?
Okay, I have two questions.
Yes.
You did briefly touch on them earlier. One is the small business loan forgiveness. You're spending for the discussion with the legislature. Is that the same? Is that the same issue that you're dealing with those boat owners who lost, who weren't able to pay their loans?
Yes.
And whether they're getting their principal paid by the seed money appropriated by the legislature?
Yes. So the debate at the OEK is who should be eligible for this forgiveness. I think some members of the Senate want to target the forgiveness predominantly to tourist boat owners. Some people in the Senate believe that it should be available to the broader SME community that were impacted by COVID. And that is part of the debate that has been going on.
And that has yet to be resolved.
Yet to be resolved.
Okay. My second question has to do with the Saudi loan for housing. You did indicated earlier that you're envisioning a partnership with state to build condominiums. Is that something that Palauans who have big pieces of land can participate in if they want to venture into developing condominiums in their property?
Okay, so I think there's some private development, some private owners that want to develop condominiums. My priority at the moment is to work with the states. If I can support the private developers, I will, but that is a commercial arrangement. That's for building profit. Whereas I view the role of the development bank is to support especially the low income sector. So my target is to provide condominiums, especially for the youth in Palau, which are going to be relatively cheaply priced. I have numbers in my head, but I need to check whether it's feasible. So I'm not saying no, I'm not going to support private sector development because we do that every single day. But for this Saudi loan in particular, I'm really keen to see if we can work with the states to develop the land that they already have to construct affordable condos.
What is the difference between a construction loan and a home equity loan?
Okay. So the main difference is that a construction loan is only used to construct a building. The home equity loan can be used for any purpose whatsoever. So the construction loan could not be used to consolidate debt, for example. It could not be used to pay for medical referral fees. It could not be used to buy a new car. It could not be used to support inventory stocking in a small business. The home equity loan can do all of those things. So it's like a one-stop shop. Depending on what people want in their lives, the home equity loan can be used for that. The construction loan is just used to construct. So at the moment, our home equity loan is 9%, and it's a 10-year loan. For our commercial mortgages, for example, if it's a commercial business, our commercial mortgages are at 10%, because that's a private sector commercial activity. So our home equity loans are 9%, commercial loan or construction loan is 10%.
Okay, I think two more. If you were to take deposits, have you thought about what interest rate the depositors would get?
I've thought about it a lot, but until I get the license, I can't actually do anything. But my thinking is I need to offer a deposit rate that encourages people to place deposits with NDBP. If I offer 0%, the same as the American banks, why should anybody move money from the American banks to NDBP? So I know for sure I need to have higher interest rates than the Americans. But there's another plan here, which is what I'm really interested in is, can the development bank encourage foreigners offshore to invest their money into Palau? So the interest rates that I have to offer need to be good enough to attract foreigners, not just Palauans. So as ever, in banking, as you well know, Nancy, it's never a simple answer. I'll have to weigh up different priorities. But the intention is to be competitive on our interest rates so that we can attract and encourage Palauans to put money with their development bank.
And what would be the minimum investment for Palauans for deposits?
We haven't finalized our program. The number one priority for me is in the next 19 days, I have to find a way for FIC to give us a response on our license application. Once they give us a response and give us a license, then we can start launching our products. I have to be very open. As it stands today, I am not at all confident that FIC will make a decision within 19 days. And if that is the case, then NDBP will not be able to take deposits. But that is something outside my control. It's something with the FIC, and I'll leave the FIC to do their job. I'll focus on my job.
Okay, just one more. Home equity loan, you said is 9%.
Yes.
My understanding on other bank is 9.5 and secured by some deposits. And so I ask, why are you giving me 1%? You said 1%, and then you're charging me 9%. And they said, well, the interest rate right now is 8%. So I said, my understanding, the interest rate is really not that high. Maybe 3, 4, it's never 9% or 8%.
Okay. So let me not do any marketing on behalf of my American competitors. I think what they are trying to say to you is that there is something called a prime rate, which is currently 8.5%. And that rate is the rate that American banks lend to credit-worthy companies in the US. I think what you're suggesting is that the American banks have a very big difference between the money that they expect borrowers to pay them and the interest rate that they give depositors. And all I can say to you, Nancy, is you are totally correct.
How, you know, we talk about savings, that I earn $500 a month, or even less than that. And you said, first I have to save some. After savings, I can spend whatever. But the interest rate on savings are so low that it really does not make sense. So I think if you were to have the FIC see this, then that makes sense for them to get back to accept deposits.
You are singing from the same hymn sheet, Nancy. This is exactly what I've been trying to explain. Why is it that Palauans put their money with American banks and have that money sent offshore and earn no interest, or almost no interest, for the benefit, when Palau has its own bank, its own development bank? Why can't this development bank take some deposits, maybe from foreigners, but also from Palauans? That will help us fund more loans back into Palau. That's something that I hope FIC can also sing from the same hymn sheet too.
What can we do as a community to help, to support?
Well, if anybody would like to lobby FIC, then I certainly won't stand in your way. But it's an active discussion. I'm very concerned about it. You know, we submitted this application 6 months ago, and here we are. We're in the last 19 days. So.
Just asking, should we write letters that get signature? Petition?
I'll let the Palauan community decide, okay? All I can say is that we have done everything that we possibly can. It's an independent agency. I don't want to interfere with their responsibility and their duties and their job. I just want to make sure that they do their job and hopefully do it on time. We're doing well so far. I've not had a PGST question. Yes.
With the Saudi loan, you're saying you're going to build a lot of houses where people can buy. Is there a possibility that they can rent to own, or they must buy the whole? And with that loan as well, can it build independent housing on a lease or a personal property?
Okay.
Is that's my first question.
Okay.
Next is, there's a home equity loan for first-time homeowners, and I understand that there's a renovation loan, and my understanding is that the renovation loan is less than the first-time homeowner. That's understandable, but to what amount can I get to renovate a home completely and not just get, you know, the materials now are very expensive.
Yes.
And I estimated my house, and I was told to just build a new house rather than renovate, because the cost is just about the same as renovation. So what's your recommendation on my dilemma?
Okay. Okay. So, so let me start with the first questions, okay? So I think your first question was, with this Saudi loan, we're planning to build condominiums. And those condominiums are for sale. Are we planning to make any of these condominiums available for rent or rent to purchase? The answer to that is yes, I think we should. That's some objective that I think we should have. We need to work through the numbers because we'll need to sell enough condominiums so that the loan is repaid, because that's where the money comes from for us to repay the Saudis. Once we've sold enough condos to repay the Saudis, then what will happen is the state will take over the remaining condominiums. And then it will be down to each state to decide how do they want to rent out those units. Because the benefit for the states is it will give them some regular income in the future, because they will own these condominiums and they can rent them out either on a rent-to-buy basis or purely on a rental basis. But that's where the bank needs to step back and allow each state to make its own decisions for the benefit of its own local community. But to answer that question, yes, the intent is to have a mix of condos to sell as well as condos for rent or rent to purchase. Now, on your particular question about should you build an entirely new house or renovate your house, I can't give you advice on that. What I can tell you is that the home equity loan is probably a good place to start, because it's a long-term loan. It's a 10-year loan, and it's at 9%. If you want to build an entirely new house, then it would be a mortgage, and that mortgage would be a 25-year mortgage. And the rate on that at the moment is 9% as well. So whichever way you go, if you need some help from our team, we've got team members here today, or come into the bank and we can take you through the specifics of your case to make sure that you have the information you need, okay, to help you.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I make one more comment? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to encourage the listeners that, and if it's possible with a bank, that, you can, the people who wants to rent, say, homes, they like an affordable home or an affordable room with a bathroom and a small kitchen. They range from $2, $3, or $450. If you have a home and you want an additional income, I suggest you go to Mr. Proctor or the employees and say, look, I have a home. I want to build a small unit beside my house or connected to my house and rent it at this price. Can I get a loan? Of course, the contractor will tell you how much it's going to cost you, and it can be done. You do that on a smaller scale. That's how one of the things you can build upon.
So you can tell Nancy is an experienced NDBP ex-director. Thank you, Nancy. How are we doing? Anything else? Yes, Irene.
She's also an experienced entrepreneur, doing exactly what she had shared for
Exactly.
people to do the same. I have one question about affordable housing. David, I think it's wonderful, this joint venture that you're forming, NDBP with the states. Now, from what I've learned when I was living in the U.S., and Cindy would vouch to this, or been around there a lot, every state has their rules about affordable housing. And I've seen some areas where they would call them Section 8, where sometimes it can turn into a little bit of a, the property owners around the area become concerned about the values of their properties due to what's happening in the affordable housing units. So I do like the idea that you're going to allow the states to make decisions on what to do after the loans are paid back. However, will the bank be able to introduce at the beginning of the joint venture some consistent across the board on a national level terms, provisions, or something that can help to keep the values of the condominiums at the affordable housing but a nice, pristine environment?
So that's a super question, Irene. Thank you for raising it. There's something called Homeowners Association. Okay. One of the things that I've noticed in Palau is that there have been some developments built in the past, but Palau has a humid environment, and perhaps the maintenance has not been quite as good as it should. And maybe something in the building materials as well, the lack of construction code. So one of the requirements I've given to the attorney that is preparing the legal documents is that for each of these developments, we will have something called a homeowners association. And what that means is that in addition to funding the infrastructure and the construction, NDBP will put some money into a little trust fund. And that trust fund will be managed by the elected people who are living in those units and will be used to spend on maintenance, whether it be fixing the elevator or repainting, or if there's some tiles that come off the roof, or solar needs to be fixed, or the shared barbecue needs to be cleaned up. That's the purpose of that fund. The idea being that we start the fund, and every year the homeowners contribute a little bit so that it keeps topping up and replacing any of expenses that are decided by the people living in that community. It's not decided by the bank. So it's a very good point. I'm trying to ensure that this is a sustainable program, that what we're building is property that people can be proud to own, proud to live in, and have an environment which is suitable for Palauans. What I don't want is to build condominiums and have them leased out to US military at very elevated rates. We see this in Guam. And I don't want that to happen in Palau. I want this purely for Palauans. That's why we're spending a lot of time to really try to structure it in a way that is suitable for Palau. So, a great question. Yes.
Thank you. My first question is, so is it PTSD a good thing or very interesting and very good information? Thank you for that. Another question, President, is my situation. So I own a small boat rental business and boat charter since I started 2014. It started really good, and then things kind of changed, and then COVID came.
Yeah.
Yes, so in fact right now I'm not going anywhere. I'm trying to get back on my feet. I know you still the bank don't like me. I mean, I'm a bad news to the bank, but I want you guys to be my friend. And what's the best option for me? How can you help me get back on my feet? And pay this debt that I had now, that I didn't pay, and try to make some profit as soon as possible. Thank you.
A great question, and it's a real question. So what we have in our team are people who their role is to try and work with each individual situation, because everybody's situation is different. There's no one solution to this. So in a situation where somebody can't afford to repay the loan under the original terms, the sooner that you come and talk to us, the easier it is for us to try and find a good solution. What we find is that people are so worried, they're frightened that something bad is going to happen. So it's a bit like going to the dentist. They don't go to the dentist when they should. They only go to the dentist when the toothache is so bad they have to go. And it's like that when coming to the bank. So the one thing I would say to people is come to the dentist at NDBP as soon as you can. Don't delay it. But what we will do is take your circumstances. We'll try to understand what money do you have. Can we reschedule the repayments over a different period so that it gives you time to consolidate, just to stabilize, just to get your head above water? You know, lifeguards are supposed to help people when they're going under. So our role is not to push you under the water for the final time. Okay? Our role is to find a way to try and get you above water so that you can swim by yourself. But that means a conversation. So this is exactly why I encourage people, come into the bank. This is why we're doing these sessions, just so that you can see we're humans, we're just like you. You know, we have to go to the dentist ourselves. We're not ogres. Please just come and talk and we'll try and find a way.
Can I just quick one?
Yes. Oh, don't tell everybody I'm an ogre in real life.
Actually, PGSD is not that bad.
Sorry?
PGSD is not that bad. Because if you are a business owner, you can get a refund. If, like, well, for your expenses, I guess you have to get a good accountant or an accountant that knows what they're doing. And you can get a refund from your business expense. So it's...
How are we doing? It's getting late. Is everybody tired? Hopefully you've had some food to eat. Look, let me just say thank you so much. It's I enjoy these sessions. It's good to hear the kind of questions. If there are things that you want to ask but maybe are a bit timid to ask in a big forum like this, don't hesitate to come in, ask us the questions. Our role is to be the development bank for Palau. Our role is to try and support this community. We are humans, we make mistakes, but if we make mistakes, we try to correct them. But hopefully tonight has given you a sense of all the work that we're doing behind the scenes. There's only 19 of us, but there's a lot of things, big things that we're working on at the same time as trying to bring these interest rates down so that people have a bit more money in their pocket. And at the same time, trying to help the community think about some of these big issues, not just PGST on its own, but Palauan customs, the fact that the population is so small, especially the employed population, and what can we do with state land authorities so that we can try and make more homes available to encourage the youth to stay, and we have a growing, vibrant community. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure seeing you tonight. Thank you.